that level to better from worst in the league to better, and, not trying to simplify it as simple as moving Nick Swisher off of first base, moving Asdrubal Cabrera. I almost called him Orlando Cabrera. Moving Asdrubal out of shortstop.
He wasn't very good defensively either.
No, he wasn't. But you know what I mean? Like, it can't be just as simple as those. But, I mean, those couple of moves right there did make a difference. It makes you wonder. But I agree with you. I mean, it goes only as far as saying any team that's playing good defense has got, to me, a better chance in October for the simple fact that the focus is so much brighter, and every individual play, the opportunity to bobble a ball is so much more if people don't have the right focus. So obviously the better you are defensively, and I don't know over history how much that bears out. Maybe there's some terrible defensive teams that just clobbered their way to the World Series, but for the most part it would make sense to me that the teams that are at the top there in fielding would also be there at the end, because that's where that really sticks out. And when you do tend to make mistakes, you're going to make more of them in October than you necessarily would in July. So interesting there. But yeah, and I'm with you on all of that. We were talking, was it yesterday, day before? I don't know. I was or was it last week even when you weren't able to be with us, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit because that was the day the plain dealer decided to attack the Victor Martinez question, And I
we're taking our turn on that next week. It's on the schedule. I'm not even joking.
All right, well, I'm with it. I mean, I've been on there, man, and I went through a lot of the things that they talked about and kind of back and forth, the pros and the cons. It all made a lot of sense to me there. But I even look at Kansas City, and I'm not going to do this much. We've got a lot of time to talk money and payrolls and things like that. But I point out to people that even when we're being frugal with the payroll, there's a $30 million difference between Kansas City and Cleveland. So for people that think that they're kindred spirits here with their low, but they are, but not as close to the bottom as you think. There's literally $30 million gap between where each team started the season. And I mean, I looked at their breakdown, the PD. They did a breakdown of the roster and all of that. They're estimating $8, $10, maybe $12 million available to reach last year's payroll. And I look at that and I go, that is the part where I get Indians fans' frustrations, because if you agree to go $10 million more on the payroll, you've now got $20, maybe $25 million to spend. You can't tell me that this team, with the core of what it's got, cannot get what it needs for that kind of money and go out here and kick some ass next year.
Well, my only counter to that would be is the Indians have almost doubled their payroll in the last 4 years, and I'm not sure that the team is much better. If we all and I agree with you. I mean, it would be great if the Dolphins.
Real quick, let me ask you while you're doing this.
Follow that up with they every time they give Chris Antonetti more money,
I know
he wastes it.
I know, and I got that. I was going to tell you this.
$10 more million will fix the problem. I don't think that it will, because
I hear you.
The last 40 hasn't fixed it, because they don't use it correctly.
No, I got you there. Let me throw this at you too. I did this last week. This was how we filled the time when you weren't able. You were making sure you were still gainfully employed. I looked at the Indians' payroll, and we were comparing like the number of players that made over $1 million and how like the entire pitching staff makes the league minimum with the exception of Atchison. And we did the math. When you took those 4 players off or at 5 when you include Axford, when you took those players off the top 5 with the money, and you realize that none of them contributed. I mean, maybe at most, what, 5 victories on the season, 6 at most between the whole group of them together, and that's counting the few games that Masterson won as a starter and the one game that Swisher won with the grand slam, and we could even throw in 1 or 2 more if you want. Point being is when you wipe those 4 or 5 players off, the Indians won 80 to 85 games, depending on how you want to look at it, with $40 million.
Yeah,
that has
absolutely.
to be some kind of record. That has to be some kind of record for value per win if you looked at it in that way of looking at it.
And I guess the glass half empty guy that I am says then that they have an $85 million payroll and they wasted $45 million of it.
Exactly. That's it. You're exactly right. That's my point.
And And I am becoming more and more of the line of thought, Jerry, that, the problem is with Chris Antonetti. For reasons like what we're talking
remember
about.
Your text a couple weeks ago.
I can't accept the argument of, well, if they had more money, they'd win. Well, I mean, to a degree, sure, but the Yankees were one game less, or
Yes.
one game worse than the Indians for an extra $130 million. And I feel like, to some level or some degree, you could give Chris Antonetti as much money, and, I can give you a long, long line of bad decisions he's made, and I'm not sure on the other side of the piece of paper that there's a long line of great decisions that he's made. Wasting $45 million or not using it correctly, is a big, big deal in my mind. And the thing is that it hasn't happened just once. I mean, investing in Nick Swisher and Michael Bourne and having it go badly after 2 years, this isn't the first time that this has happened. And that, to me, is the real sticking point, and where I start to say, maybe the problem isn't how much money. Maybe it's the problem as to how it's spent. Because I don't know that anyone could make a case that the next $10 million would be the magical $10 million that solves all of their woes.
Unless it brought Victor. It might not solve all of them, but it would solve a couple of them. But you're right. No, I'm joking. But you are absolutely right, especially when you look at it that way. That's why I wanted to get to chopping off those top four guys, because I'm like, man, I mean, we did it on the air, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. $42 million? I mean, that's what they spent to win these games. That's amazing. You talk about value over replacement. There you go, man, because
sure.
That's amazing when you look at it that part. And that's why I said, too, that this ties into what you've said, what I've said. And Dan Wismar also, he's got a good point off of the baseball field. He said if it was up to him, if he ran the Indians, forget the stuff on the field. He'd clean house in the season ticket sales department and get some guys motivated, some new plans on how we sell tickets, because they don't do a good job of utilizing what they do have and have, I get him there, because he looks at it from that perspective too. But looking at all of those coming together, when are you ever going to have the opportunity? And this is where, when you say, why would you go spend $15 million a year on Victor, besides what it will bring at the gate? Besides that, I mean, you're going to reach a window real quick. If you think this payroll is jacked and bloated with those guys at the top now, wait until every pitcher on the roster is not making the major league minimum. I mean, each year that goes by, there's some of these guys that are going to balloon in how much money they make, and they're instantly going to twist this thing into something different. So the window to take advantage of not only your core talent, but their monetary feasibility is also limited.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, when the plain dealer talks about the Indians having $10 to $12 million available, that I like say put an asterisk on that, because you touched on one of those ways, because of that young pitching staff. Do you want to try and lock Corey Kluber up long term, or do you want to end up in the Justin Masterson zone where they were, 6, 8, 10 months ago, trying to come up with a deal and debating what his value is and hoping to get a hometown discount of some kind, or a short-term deal. If you want to sign him up, now's the time before he hits, before his arbitration clock begins. And I'll tell you, if Corey Kluber has another year in 2015 like he did in 2014, the Indians aren't going to want to go to arbitration with him. I mean, it would be advantageous for the Indians to do a long-term deal with him now, if they ever want to get any kind of discount. Because, like I said, if he has another year like he did in 2014, what he's going to make in arbitration is going to be quite pricey. And Carlos Carrasco is another one. I mean, I'm very interested. He's arbitration eligible this year, and I think it'll be very interesting to see how much he can get if they end up going to arbitration with him, because he had 2 good months as a starter, but he also pitched well out of the bullpen. And, his numbers are kind of all over the place in this strange year, but all of his numbers are pretty good, Jerry. And so whether you consider him a reliever or you consider him a starter or you consider him both, he had a really nice 2014. And for all of the things that everybody, lauded about him in the last 2 months of the season, that's all going to be used in his case to get paid. And, I think it's going to be very interesting what he's going to get if they ever end up getting to arbitration. And if they don't, I think Carlos Carrasco is like the Brian Hoyer of the Indians. How do you come up with a fair contract based on, the small sample size that you have? But they're going to have to come up with something. And so, for those two reasons, for Carrasco and Kluber, I'm not sure that that's, a $10 to $12 million slush fund to just go out and use however you'd like. And another one to consider is Cody Allen. Go back in time and look at what happened when Chris Perez was made the closer early, and look at the numbers that he brought in through arbitration. Is that a road you want to go down with Cody Allen, where you want to find yourself paying a closer $5 and $7 million a season? I'm not sure that that's a road you want to go down for a guy that pitches an inning a night. And the value of a closer in the game of baseball is slowly starting to change, and teams don't want to give up that money. So if you want Cody Allen here long term, it might be to the Indians' advantage again to look at a long-term deal for him. And I can tell you pretty certain that they're not going to get deals with all three of them this winter. But if they did, your $10 million's long gone.
That's gone
already.
Absolutely.
Before you ever start talking about going on a free agent market. And that's why I think this is a strange winter without blowing up your team. I think they have to consider some big decisions to improve this roster on the field, but also in the checkbook.
Good for Russell Wilson on the road. 21 fantasy points,
That's
38 fantasy points in
Just,
2 road games.
Ignore that. Ignore the man who won't stop talking. There we go. Sorry about that, Mike. Keep going.
No problem. I just think
he wouldn't stop talking. I'm like, shut up, man.
It's like talking to my wife. We have these same conversations, She just starts telling me things, and we just talk over top of each other. It's good. So,
that wasn't me.
No.
That was a website in the background. When you're hitting the stop button and it's got those autoplay videos, and you're like, shut up, man, shut up.
So, but yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting winter, and I think the Indians are going to have to consider maybe some bold moves, maybe some things that, haven't been discussed. But, I'll throw one out for you that, could help solve some of those things I just talked about and freaking up more money. And, if you want to live in the dream of bringing back Victor Martinez, I think we all know that there's no way that's going to happen with Swisher and Santana on this roster, both basically being first baseman and DHs. You're not moving Swisher. What about moving Carlos Santana? His value is not near what it used to be now that he's a first baseman instead of a catcher, or even when he was a terrible third baseman. So, what about moving him and his $7 and $8 million over the next couple years? And then you open a spot for Victor, and, I think Carlos Santana is a guy who could clearly bring you back value that can help this roster immediately.
I agree. I said maybe that's where you get, the pitcher that you may have to go looking for in free agency or something, or shore up an outfield. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could go. Actually, that's funny. I mentioned that yesterday. I said, you guys know me. I'm not the trade Carlos guy. I'd love to see what him and Victor together in the middle of that lineup could look like if you've got Brantley and some protection there. And but at the same time, I said the reality is as much as I wish it would be Swisher, and I joked the other day. I said, Cleveland's been on a roll. LeBron came home. Brian Hoyer's doing pretty well. Any chance Nick Swisher wakes up tomorrow and feels completely guilt-ridden and decides to void the rest of his contract and say, you know what, Cleveland, My bad. I'm going to hook you guys up. Of course it's not going to happen. I wish it was him. But I do realize that the only potential tradable piece in that part of the equation is Carlos Santana. So as long as we're not giving him away, and I'm with you, I think you can get some significant value. I would be willing to entertain that, absolutely.